Sure. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Ready?
Yes.
So, hello everyone. My name is Hajar and today's live we're going to talk about a very important topic. It is the topic of the hour, as we say in Arabic also, موضوع الساعة. So it is the movement of the Black Lives Matter. So, well, of course, this is part of the organization called LIFT, which is a non-governmental and a non-profit organization that works in the field of human development and which actually believes that together we rise humans for humanity. So today we're having a very special guest, Alexandria, and who is the founder of the World is Watching organization. So could you please introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, Hajar, and hello to all of our friends in Morocco and throughout the Middle East. It's an honor to be able to have this conversation with you all. We're very lucky that we're in a time of technology, right, where we're able to have these conversations and connect to new communities. So I'm very excited to have this conversation. My name is Alexandria Maloney. I am the co-founder and president of a global coalition called The World is Watching. We are a collective of individuals throughout the international community who want to support and contribute to the Black Lives Matter movement. Some of that is with the Black Lives Matter movement in the United States, and some of that is internationally and globally. So I can explain how the work that we do in those ways a little bit later, but I'm really happy to be here. I am American by citizenship. I'm based in Washington, D.C. It is a warm July day here today. So Hajar, I'm happy to be here and answer any questions that you have for me.
Well, first of all, it's an honor to have you as a guest for today, and thank you for accepting the request to be with us. So the first question that perhaps some people might be asking, some people might be confused, is like, what is the Black Lives Matter movement?
Yes. So there may be a lot of different interpretations of there may be a lot of answers to this question. But what Black Lives Matter means to me is that it's supporting a cause that is ensuring the equality and the equity of opportunities to Black and Brown communities in the US and in the world. I think at a very basic and fundamental level, Black Lives Matter is, a slogan, it's a saying, it's an affirmation. It affirms us that, because of recent incidents or circumstances that may point to Black lives in the US and in the world not having the same value as other lives necessarily. So I think that it affirms that. It's an affirmation of Black life, one, and two, it's a method of mobilization, right? Let's mobilize around how can we help ensure the growth and the development and the protection of Black communities in the US, but also throughout the world.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you so much for this introduction. And since you are the founder of the organization of The World is Watching, can you tell us the goals of your organization concerning the Black Lives Matter movement?
Absolutely. So we have three key areas of things that we work on or help support. So The World is Watching is not an official organization connected to Black Lives Matter. So we're a global coalition. We started off as a social campaign, attempting to connect and share resources and information with the global Black Lives Matter movement. So as we saw about a month ago, we had dozens, so many different international protests happening. Some of them done by professional, social justice organizers who organize protests regularly, and some who, we have one organizer who said, I posted the protest on Facebook, and I thought only maybe 40 or 50 people will come, or my friends and my family, and 7,000 people showed up. Wow. So we have a lot of different organizers who are interested in supporting Black Lives Matter. right, in the US, but also in the world. So we help to give the guidance, the information, the correct information from like the Black Lives Matter headquarters to the different organizers who are busy out doing protests. They don't have the time necessarily um, to sit and do the research on how do I become an official Black Lives Matter chapter? What information do I need to know? How can I do this work? How can I do the most good with this work? For people who are interested and compelled by this cause, but may need more support or information on how to succeed in this work. So that's one big area. We help connect international organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement abroad to the proper information with the Black Lives Matter headquarters in Washington, D.C. is the first thing. We also help provide guidance and connect with these different international organizers on strategy calls. We bring in expert organizers who can help solve specific problems that country organizers may be having. The second big thing that we do with The World is Watching is we have recently released our declaration. So we have a petition of about almost 3,000 signatures from members of the international community all around the world who stand in support in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement and want to see these changes, especially in the US right now, because that's where the focus is. So we have a declaration that we will be sending out to government officials, state level, local level, the police associations, the United Nations, simply stating that we are in support of these reforms, of these changes, such as Campaign Zero and other specific policy demands that can solve some of these really hard, challenging issues that keep cycling, that keep happening. So how can we stop those things from happening that put Black and brown communities in the US at a disadvantage in life for many reasons and many ways, and support policies and changes that support the equity of the equity and the safety, of Black and brown communities in the US. And the third thing that The World is Watching does, we use our social media. We have a social media campaign. So we like to amplify the voices, particularly of the global Black Lives Matter movement during this time. Because what's so special is that, no matter how I encourage individuals to remember, no matter how big or small the effort is that you do, it still counts. It still matters. We are in the biggest civil rights movement in recorded history right now. And I want our generation to be able to look back and say, we did what we could, or we made it, we supported, whether it was donating or signing a petition or writing to, our government officials or helping in whatever ways we could to support this really important, one of the most important efforts of our time.
Yeah, this is really interesting. So as you know, like the Black Lives Matter movement hasn't just started recently. It dates back, I think, to the 60s, right?
Correct. So in my opinion, the words Black Lives Matter is, it's symbolic of a cause that is the civil rights movement that has been happening since Black and brown communities were brought to the United States as slaves 400 some years ago. So there's always been this fight for Black lives, for equality, for safety, for protection towards Black and brown communities. But in the 60s, there are different eras in history where there were particular spikes, especially within the policy of policy changes towards Black and brown communities, such as the abolitionist era and Reformation era and the civil rights era in the 60s, as you mentioned. But I think that the Black Lives Matter movement really pays homage to and honors the work that has been done from the 60s civil rights era and all the leaders that were a part of that movement, and honestly is building on that movement. And we hope to continue to build that momentum and see these changes that are very necessary.
Yes. All right. So thank you so much for your response. And you mentioned the notion of safety, and like now we've seen a lot of actual events in which like there's no safety for Black and brown people in the U.S. So how could you say that, or how can we stop the brutality of, for example, the police system in the U.S. And even globally?
Sure. So I like to start this conversation about police brutality with saying
Mm-hmm.
all cops are not bad cops.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
um, I think that that's important for us to frame this conversation because you have law enforcement who are doing their, their mission is to
Yeah.
protect and defend
Absolutely.
who? Us as communities. And
Mhm.
some law enforcement is doing that. And that's very important um, to ensure the safety of our society and our communities. In terms of how can the US do a better job of preventing police brutality or preventing that from coming, we've seen some progress and some movement in different cities addressing these issues. So for
Mhm.
example, by banning or not allowing particular physical actions that police officers can do, so not
Yeah.
being able to do a chokehold or
Oh, yeah.
certain positions and things like that. That's one tangible way. um, but in my opinion, how I think that um, police brutality can be addressed and abolished, if you will,
Yeah.
in this time is with, so the first thing is
Yeah.
we need to know where is it happening, right?
Mhm.
Some cities will report that. You can Google it and look, and some cities do not, right? So all of that information needs to be accessible by the public to know where are the highest levels. It shouldn't be happening anywhere, but
Yeah.
where are the highest levels? Because that's where the biggest intervention will need to be from the federal government, maybe like the Department of Justice to handle that. Um, Secondly, there's a in the US, we have a concept called stop and frisk, which means
Mhm.
police officers can stop anyone at any time and order a search on that person where some of these acts may occur. That information needs to be reported. It's called stop and frisk. We need to know when those are happening because that is correlated sometimes to the high level of police brutality in some of these places. So the first step I would say is we need access to all this reporting and this data. Secondly, how can we hold these, police accountable at the different, city levels, the associations, et cetera, um, and ensure that individuals who have some wrongdoing, who are police officers, that they don't get a free pass, that they're completely protected. There needs to be some justice for
Mhm.
lives that are killed unjustly, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then the third part I would say is a need for some accountability mechanism. So for example, right now some cities, if a police officer gets in trouble, they just have to, they take a break for 2 weeks, paid leave,
Oh,
you get paid for the 2 weeks and then go back to work. I think that there needs to be some revisit, and there is some with different policy organizations and demands such as Campaign Zero, which outlines some of these specific things on how they can be changed. But I
mhm.
think the key things are reporting, and there needs to be an accountability mechanism, both from the federal level, but also I think it would be productive to have it from a community level in the
Yeah.
form of some sort of coalition or something. I'd also be curious to hear what other police officers have that can be a potential solution to these things, because I'm sure it's hard for many police officers right now who go to work every day, do their job, are not um, going over the line, not crossing the line on these
Mhm.
things. And I'm sure that police officers also have ideas about
Yeah.
how we can continue to build trust between
Mhm.
us as the public and police officers and police organizations.
Yeah. Absolutely. That
Mm.
is totally right. So, what do you think are the causes of racism nowadays in the U.S.?
Ooh, that's a deep question, Haja. That's a deep question. um, it's hard to have this conversation without speaking about the historical context of the United States. So although this isn't our generation, you know, we didn't build this system that we're in right now.
Yeah.
This is because of, you know, generations past, histories past, decisions made by people who are long gone. But, you know, starting from 400 years ago, the fact that we as the US, you know, have a foundation of a societal foundation that at that time legally, right, like on paper, disadvantaged Black and anyone who was not white. So that's the first thing. So as the US has tried to address these different things throughout the years, you know, coming from the abolition of slavery, the Emancipation Proclamation, you know, all these different eras of time, you know, I like to think of it as we can't change the past, right? We can only try to help bring solutions for the future.
Yeah.
And I think that for us in the US, it's important to look at the situation for what it is, right? Look at the data, look at the information, and say, okay, this is where we are. This is where we would like to be. What are things that we can do for us to get there? How can we get to a world where people feel completely safe, or feel not feel safe, where they are safe, you know, and not scared of their own law enforcement or their own, you know, governing bodies, that they don't have their best interest at heart or their safety at heart. So that's such a deep question. Like that could be a call in itself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, actually, it's very sad that we are in the 21st century and inequalities between people, different backgrounds, different skin color, different genders are still like facing this kind of discrimination. But concerning this movement, what are the challenges that you're facing while like enduring in this movement?
Sure. So I'd like to make a point, you know, to make sure that I correctly explain the difference between, and I think that this is really important to this conversation, so that's why I'm going to say it, but the difference between racism and institutional racism. So racism, for example, is just, I think I'm better than you because I am this race, right? Whereas institutional racism are, you know, policies and structures existing that give advantage to a particular race, right? So things like segregation, right, in the 50s, in the US, white and Black students had to go to different schools legally. These are examples of different institutional, you know, institutional racism, that housing that individuals, you know, Black populations cannot legally not allowed to purchase, you know, land or property in particularly white areas. So when the policy is changed, for example, I'll use education and segregation as an example. When the policy changes and they say, okay, boom, today we will integrate every single school that we have. Every school must have Black and white, must have all individuals. Just because the law has changed does not mean that other steps have not been taken to hold that system, to continue to have that. So, you know, the first thing I'd say is like needing to understand, again, like how I said before, understanding what's wrong and how can we fix it. But having individuals who are experts in these areas to say, actually, no, this is illegal. You can't, you can't not let me buy a house in this neighborhood, right? So, but sometimes what the challenging part is that a lot of the time with these discriminatory regulations or policies, it's not on paper, but it's still happening, right? So they may say, oh, well, actually, you know, what may occur is that, oh, well, you know, we're not allowing you to purchase this home because you're Black, you know, it's for some other reason, or, you know, some other thing that, doesn't allow you to do that, whether it's housing, education, taxes, voting. There's a lot of challenges right now where Black folks are having a disadvantage, the ability to vote in certain places because of the coronavirus, which has caused some, challenges in this area. But, that certain districts in some states have more voting facilities. One area, one county may have 6 places to vote where they can go in and vote, but the Black county may only have 1 place that all of these people are expected to go vote in. And I don't believe in coincidences. I don't. But I look at it from the big picture, and I say and I try to keep my eyes on the end goal, on the focus goal, which is how can we create more equality? How can we ensure that all students get a good quality education, that we ensure that all members, no matter where you live, you can get on good transportation to be able to get to work, that you are able to vote in places, or that you're not deterred from voting. So I don't know if that answered the question. I'm sorry. But
that was really,
that's kind of my views on that.
Yeah, thank you so much for your answer, by the way. It was like, I think a lot of people are not aware of like this kind of discriminatory acts that are happening in the US. And me, myself, like I wasn't aware about, for example, the voting thing that you told me about. So it is really an eye-opening issue that you talked about. So thank you so much. So the next question that I have is like, how is the world is watching trying to reform Black communities?
Sure. So I don't know if we have the, power or the influence to completely reform all Black communities. And I'd like to reframe that and say that the world is watching, is supporting organizations, causes, and policies that are supporting the equity of Black communities in that, because some of the challenges that we see are not the cause. The cause is not from the Black community. They're just people are just living their life. It's actually other external factors that need to be addressed. So I think that's how I would answer that question. But, again, the campaign Zero, which is one of the biggest, most well-known policy reforms that the world is watching, has signed on and endorsed, is one way. There's also been a lot of good work that's been done since this time with different social justice organizations, with the Black Lives Matter organization, with different government organizations that are committed and support Black communities, such as the NAACP, with the U.S. Congress, the Congressional Black Caucus. There's so much work where people are saying, we want to do everything that we can to ensure that, no one else is killed in an unjust way, that no other Black life is taken unjustly. So that's what I would say. That's how the world is watching, is working towards supporting equity in Black communities.
All right, thank you so much. I just like have one question. Are Indigenous people and people of different colors are also part of the Black Lives Matter movement?
That's a really good question, and you'll hear different responses to that. There's some individuals or groups who say that this is exclusively about Black and African, individuals of Black and African descent, specifically for Black Lives Matter. In my opinion, because the work that is being done with Black Lives Matter, the movement, directly affects our Indigenous, communities. In my opinion, there's a clear connection there. But in terms of, because we get this question a lot with the world is watching, especially from our friends and colleagues, our international organizers abroad, like, should our work directly support just African Americans in the US? And these really important questions now that we are here, right now that it's happening. And in my opinion, I always ask folks, support African Americans in what ways you can, and Black communities in the US in the ways
Yeah.
that you can. I'm also a believer that the best work and the most work that we really see comes at a local level. So I ask, when I speak to different international, and this kind of points to one of the other questions on the global impact here.
Mhm.
We encourage organizers and our international friends and supporters. How are Black communities in your country? How are they treated? How are they supported? Are they protected? Many African and Black communities in other parts of the world outside of the US, maybe in the country for many different reasons or many different ways, right? That can include, legal citizens, born born citizens. Um,
Yeah.
in many countries, there's large undocumented populations of
Mhm.
African and African descent in these countries. Are they protected? What what is there a policy that protects these people, right? And
Mhm.
that's a hard question for some of these countries where there's a strong sense of, there's a strong perspective on immigration policy.
Yes.
So, in terms of the world is watching, like that's the biggest advice that we can give for um, um, the Black Lives Matter movement, where
Mhm.
we're seeing protests happening in many parts of the world.
Yeah.
I know in particular, like the organizers in Australia, for example, rightfully so, their work is directly connected to the indigenous population
Yeah.
of their country, because those are the individuals um, who are in need of the reform and the
Mhm.
protection and the support.
Yeah.
So that's my response to that question. I hope that
Right.
answers the question.
Yeah, I did, and thank you so much. So, this question that comes probably might be related to the previous one. So, does like hashtag All Lives Matter movement hurt or reinforce the cause of Black Lives Matter movement?
Ooh, that's a good question. um, I think that hashtag All Lives Matter does both things, because by someone telling me all lives matter, it's it's almost saying, even though the words are not saying I don't agree with Black Lives Matter, you're giving an alternative answer instead of just saying yes, Black Lives Matter. Of course, Black Lives Matter. Yes, simple.
Mhm.
um I think that it can, I don't know if it's hurting the cause per se, but I think that I don't know, it hurts me in an individual level, because it's like, it's not asking much of someone to affirm that your life matters. We know that Black lives matter, right?
Mhm.
um but why I'll say that I think that it hurts and reinforces Black lives matter is that it makes it clear for us why it's even more important to say,
Mhm.
that Black lives matter, because there are individuals or groups out
Yeah.
here that believe all lives matter. And I'm not saying all lives don't matter. Of course, all lives matter. But in this particular situation, we need your help
Yeah.
in in creating policies and platforms and ensuring the safety of Black lives,
Yeah.
which are clearly being treated differently because we're Black, right? Whether it's at the criminal justice level, the education level, etc. The data speaks for itself.
Mhm.
So that's not even really an argument, in my opinion, because I
Yeah.
think we all see the truth. It's clear. We see videos with our own eyes of someone being killed by a police officer, in that way, with a knee on their neck. I don't
Yeah.
know if I've seen that. I haven't seen that with my own eyes of, a white person.
Mhm.
So I think that All Lives Matter has the ability to, you know, hurt in the sense that it's
Mhm.
like a little bit hurtful, but also reinforce the importance of the work, reinforces the importance of Black Lives Matter. And what I'm also finding is that you may not have people who are, very outwardly and loud with their racism, but it's like a quiet racism, if you will, where it's like, well, it's not that I don't support Black Lives Matter, but ... which means, that erases everything that you say before. And I think that I can't speak for all, but I think that some of the perspective, some of the things that we're hearing for all lives matter, I do believe this comes from a place that it's a place of hurt within those communities. Like, it's sad, right? It's sad to have to think about that Black communities and Black individuals are treated differently. And I think by saying all lives matter for some people, that's a way to, try to rationalize or understand or, come to a conclusion for themselves that that Black lives are equal to white or all lives, which I think it's clear as day that what we're seeing is challenging that narrative.
All right. Thank you so much. And I have another question, please. Like, how did the Black Lives Matter movement influence the judicial system, if any influence is witnessed at all?
Yes. So I will say that the Black Lives Matter movement has influenced the judicial system and some of the courts and the hearings, with the help of the social media movement around this. By bringing it to the national and the international level, we have seen that some of the police officers who were responsible for the killings of some of these individuals have been arrested, or they have been arrested, or are facing some judicial process. We're also seeing at the congressional level with the U.S. Congress, which is our biggest legislative level, that we are seeing many policies being written. And not to say that, that's the most important thing, because it's not. It's also about the implementation of these things, because we can have policies all day to say, okay, this is what we're going to do, but if the police department is not listening to that or not being held accountable, what happens to the police department when they don't follow a rule? Who's going to ensure that they're following the rules? And at this time, to my knowledge, there isn't much capacity that is holding a lot of these police associations and not police associations, but police departments accountable in that way. And it's not realistic to expect individuals to govern themselves, to police themselves, right? So there has to be some sort of accountability mechanism. So I do see changes with the judicial system, and I hope to continue to see more.
So what I get from your actual response, that you're not calling for the complete abolition of the police institution, but rather the reform, right?
Correct. So that is my personal, I don't like the idea of living in chaos or anarchy. And again, I acknowledge that, not all cops are bad cops. Law enforcement serves a very important role in our society in keeping communities safe. When that law enforcement agency is, abiding by the rules and the laws that it's set to do. So no, I'm not in support of complete abolition. But again, reforms that help us to hold these police departments accountable, releasing more information, more data on how many people are being arrested, how many stop and frisk, how many reported cases of police brutality. That information will help us to be able to pinpoint some of the key areas, or a good starting point to say, okay, this city has a very high level of police brutality reported. Okay, so this seems like a good starting point for these new policies that we want to prevent that from happening.
Yeah, this will give it will make it clear to the public that this is what's happening and this is why we're doing it. That will make things, I think, easier to reform later on, I guess, right?
Yes.
All right. And since we're running out of time, I have one last question. And I really enjoyed, by the way, the discussion. I hope it could last longer.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, we are restricted by the time limit. But how do we, as communities, ensure that our support to Black Lives Matter movement is not tokenistic?
Yes. That's
Mm-hmm.
such a good question. That's probably one of the most important questions I've heard in a long time. um, I think it starts at, this might sound corny, but it starts at an individual level. Do
Mm-hmm.
you want to help? Yes or no? Yes or no? Simple as that. And
Yeah.
if you say yes, then do what you can to learn about how you can help these causes. Um, Helping these causes, particularly at the global level, yes, but that can be overwhelming. So
Mm-hmm.
starting at the local level, how
Yeah.
are Black and brown communities where I live, are they protected, and if
Mm-hmm.
so, how are they protected? Or is there any law that protects different populations? Or are there laws in my own country that are causing different discrimination and inequality? I'm sure there are, every country, almost any country has existing social justice organizations. You can Google and research different social organizations such as Lyft, such as so many other organizations that are here to do this work and support this work. That's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing I would say is attempt to connect to different organizations that
Mm-hmm.
are doing this work,
Yeah.
and commit and do what you can. Don't feel like it's your job to have to answer the world's problems.
Mm-hmm.
um, this is, these problems will can probably, hopefully not, but we will be fighting these until the end of time, until long after we are gone from this earth. So we want to be able to look back and say, I did help in what ways that I could, whether it's signing the petition, donating, joining an organization, learning and researching for your own knowledge, more about there's so many resources now
Yeah.
available to learn more about, the civil rights history,
Yeah.
history of social justice
Mm-hmm.
movements in the U.S. and around the world. Um, and then, when you come to these places, or to these spaces, I'll say, when you come to the space of a social justice organization, or to a friend or an individual, um,
Mm-hmm.
go open, be willing to learn, lean into uncomfortable conversations. I have a colleague who says, he's a white male. He says, Alex, I welcome these conversations and I want to lean in to the conversations. I think that's an awesome mentality to have, because that frees you almost of fear of what the conversation will bring,
Yeah.
uncomfortable, because it's uncomfortable conversations to have. And if you don't know what to do, show up anyway. you know Come anyway. Be willing to learn, be willing to help in what ways you can. um and 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 try not to get emotional on it, but I want to say thank you to everyone in the world, like, who has done anything to help support these causes of Black and brown communities in the US, to help support these causes of Black and brown communities around the world, and in their own communities, indigenous communities as well,
Mm-hmm.
and minorities within your own countries as well. Because although it may not be popular, right, in a lot of a lot of places that we live, it's, in my opinion, it's some of the most important work that we will do in our time. So, Hajar, thank you so much for, allowing me this platform to share more about Black Lives Matter and the Global Black Lives Matter Network. Um, you can find more information on The World is Watching on our social media and on our website, theworldiswatching.blm.org. You can connect with me directly. I'm Alexandria J. Maloney across platforms. Um, and I'm just so excited for the good work that is happening and that will continue to happen.
Thank you so much, Alexandria. It was like such a pleasure to have you
Yes.
for today, and also to have the honor to talk to you directly. It is really, really an honor for me. Thank you so much. And I hope that this actual movement come with fruitful results soon, and that we will not have to see like such events that are happening in the near future as soon as possible. And yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, this is the end of today's live, and I hope that the dear audience have enjoyed and learned a lot from this conversation. And I'm sure like they've learned, for example, how they can contribute to it and what they can do in order to put an end to the kind of discrimination and racism that is happening not only in the US but all over the world. So thank you so much, Alexandria, and I hope to see you in a future occasion as well.
Great. Absolutely. Absolutely. So great talking to you, and thank you, and have a good day, Hajar.
Thank you. Goodbye.